passed out.
Oh, Steph, what about you?
Good morning, everyone. We're gonna go ahead and get started. It's 9 o'clock.
Was 7 to 9?
That's right.
7 to 9? Yeah, right.
So welcome everyone to our July 10th, 2022 strategic planning meeting. Let the record reflect that all 5 commissioners are present, our executive management team. And Scott, we're gonna start off with. This is what I can't do. So we're gonna start off with the discussion on the Spokane Unite recommendation. And so Scott, I'm gonna let you you've got all the documents here and.
Well, so Spokane Unite is the name of what Gavin, Rick, and Teresa has named this. So I just pulled some from their documents. I've attached all the executive summary that they had sent out the week after their meeting when they shared the community feedback or the community presentation for what they're recommending. In the documents amongst the documents are also what they had come up with, what they proposed organizational structure. It has a resolution that would contemplate the establishment of this public development authority along with charter and bylaws for the board. I know you all wanted to have some time to discuss what you've heard, what you've read, what you've seen, and evaluate what your considerations might be around their recommendations. We've got Jim Amacio, who helped develop, based on the requests of the Spokane Unite team, helped develop the legal documents. So there's questions for him, and depending on where the discussion goes with the commissioners, we can jump into some of our entitlement funding. George Dahl is here as well to present on how that's been spent, what commitments are there. So we've got a variety of different areas to cover depending on where the commissioners want to go.
George back in the
George is
corner.
right there, yeah.
You go ahead and kind of see. Sorry.
We won't let you hide.
That's how these, we're just starting these strategic planning sessions, but, Scott gets to lead them and have everyone at the table that needs to be here, so.
Commissioner CUNY, I wonder, since as Scott indicated that I was involved in putting together the documents, not necessarily the language in the documents, that was done by the 3 individuals involved. I wonder if I could just give an overview. I know most of the board members know this, but actually it's kind of confusing about the way it was really set up. And so, as Scott mentioned, Chris Anderson and I actually prepared about 4 different documents. But the documents I'd like to talk about this morning are the interlocal agreement, the ILA, and the document attached to it, which is the formal charter that is going to be creating the Public Development Authority. Firstly, I want to remind the board what we did. Last February, we signed a resolution where we agreed with all the other regional entities as to what the purpose of this process was going to be. And the purpose in the resolution that we signed along with the other public entities was the Spokane regionally elected leadership announces a 90-day due diligence period to evaluate options for a regional and collaborative model to improve our collective efforts to address homelessness and its impacts on the community. So the resolution that everyone signed had that as the purpose. But I think we need to remember what the end game was. And so I copied this right out of the document because I thought it was good to remind the board. And the end game said, following the due diligence period, legislative bodies will evaluate the information developed and the likelihood of success for a regional collaborative authority model and give consideration as to whether and what degree to participate in the regional authority or other envisioned regional homeless efforts. So the board made no commitment, none of the entities, except to look at what was provided to us by the United organizations and then decide how to move forward. So I thought that was important to remind the board.
No, I appreciate that, thank you, because I think that was one of the things that in the letter, we just
Yeah.
said that we were, hoping to have them come back to us with some,
Yes,
thoughts and ideas, but, that didn't mean that we were automatically adopting that.
you're exactly right. So then the critical, the documents that Scott alluded to are really the critical key elements. And there's really, the most important element is the interlocal agreement. Because attached to the interlocal agreement is actually the charter which the Board of County Commissioners would adopt, which would create the Public Development Authority. Let me go back one step. There are two approaches to establishing an entity regional to address homelessness within Spokane County. One option, which is the option which is used in King County and Seattle, is the interlocal agency agreement approach. And the King County model, the city of Seattle and King County set up a separate legal entity to assume homeless responsibilities within King County. That's option one. Option two, which King County also considered, was to establish a public development authority, which is a separate legal entity, which has the same ability as the interlocal agency model. So you got the two models. In King County, they decided not to use the public development authority model, which is the model which has been proposed here. And the reason in King County they opted not to use it is because there was a perception only one entity can establish a public development authority, either a city or a county. But it's hard for both, you can't legally, it's hard for both of them to establish that. So in King County, there was an issue between the county and the city of Seattle as to who would create the public development authority. And because they couldn't agree with that, they used the interlocal agency model approach, because under that approach, two entities can jointly agree to form a new third-party entity. And that's what they did over in King County. And the new third-party entity in King County has the same authority as a public development would have. But because politically there was this issue as to who would create public development authority, they decided in King County to use the IL agency approach. In Spokane County, the proposal which we have in front of us is the Public Development Authority approach. And I think that approach was favored, at least as I understand it, by the United Group, is because the county commissioners and the city council and most of the public entities in Spokane County were familiar with what a public development authority is. Separate legal entity set up. It's set up by a city or a county. It has whatever authority it is clothed with by the city or county, and it has a lot of functions. There's two things it can't do. It has no powers of eminent domain, and it cannot issue taxes. It cannot issue, but it can borrow money and it can issue debt. So those are two things it can do, and we'll talk about that a little further. So, how do you go about setting up a public development authority when you've got 6 legal entities or 7 that are interested in the homeless issue? So what was decided to do here was to prepare an interlocal agency agreement. And the interlocal agency agreement, which I prepared at the direction of United, provides that all the entities who sign the agreement are going to agree to certain things. Number one, they all agree that Spokane County will create the new Homeless Public Development Authority. Everyone who signs this ILA agrees to that. Number two, they agree that the Public Development Authority that's formed will have a particular charter, and the charter is attached to the agreement. We wanted to be sure that everyone who signed the agreement that was agreeing that Spokane County could set up the PDA would know exactly what the PDA terms and conditions will be. So attached to the ILA is actually the form of the charter. Number 3, all the parties in the ILA agree to transfer operations, employees, and services. Let me go back. They all agree, if they sign off on it, to transfer operations, employees, and services to the PDA as provided in the ILA, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then number 4, they agree that the PDA will have whatever authority that the state law provides. Now, let me go back. So, the way the ILA is set up, there are 6 entities public entities who are signatories to the ILA. They include the county, City of Spokane Valley, City of Cheney, City of Medical Lake, and City of Airway Heights. The ILA has language in it that says any other city or town that wants to join that isn't a party here can join at any time they want. I put in language without an amendment to the agreement, so long as they are a city or town within the Spokane County. And so we added that. So there's a way for other entities whose names are not listed as the top 6 to join.
Which page is that listed on?
That they have the right to join, Commissioner CUNY?
That lists the names of all the cities.
Well, the names of all the cities, Commissioner CUNY, is actually on the first one of six. One of 6 on the first paragraph has all the names of the cities and towns. And then if you go to the last page, the signature blocks on page 5 of 6 lists the 6 cities and towns. And I'm looking at the ILA. Mine says page 6 of 6. I apologize. I wonder if I could pose upon Ron to pull up the documents that he has so we could go to the ILA.
It starts, if you're looking at the of 91 pages, it's page 15. That's where it starts. 15 of 91.
So the critical thing, Commissioner CUNY, and I apologize, I should list it. The critical thing is there are 6 cities who are signatories to the ILA. Thank you, Ron, for placing that on the agenda.
Thank you.
There are 6 cities who would initially sign the ILA, and the ILA provides that other cities and towns can join at any time without a formal amendment to the agreement and be parties to the agreement.
Then it goes to the next page.
Now remember, the key here is anyone who signs the agreement is agreeing to 3 primary things. 1, the county will create the PDA. 2,
So can I have a question? So why is City of Liberty Lake not one of those?
They just haven't participated so far, but they could sign on. These are all the entities that actually participated over the last 90 days.
Nobody from Deer Park showed up,
Okay.
nobody from Liberty
Okay,
Lake
thank you
showed
for
up.
explaining that to us.
No what?
They could still be a part of it. We should probably do outreach, but they haven't been part of the conversation, so it might be a little much to.
And I
Mention them
believe all of these entities signed that original letter
Okay.
that started the whole 90-day
Oh,
discussion.
yes.
I think all of these entities, they have taken an action to put their name on that original letter that we all signed.
Okay. And they should all be listed on the Spokane Unite website, the logos.
Okay. I mean, just because they're a large enough city that we would need to have.
Yeah,
them
and this doesn't have anything to do with size, it's
Okay.
just that they signed that initial letter, I believe.
Okay.
and in that regard, Chairman CUNY, if you look at the ILA in section 7, subparagraph H, it provides that other small cities and towns can join at any time, so in case they change their minds and they want to participate. So, we've got at least 6 people, and the key here is, when you sign off on this agreement, you are agreeing, and this is the key, that the county will create the Public Development Authority. The language with the Public Development Authority will be exactly the same as attachment A, which is the charter of the Public Development Authority. And let me address that. For many years, when we create public development authorities, we've had three documents. We have a resolution the county commissioners adopts, and then we have a charter that is adopted under the resolution, and then you have bylaws. By law, you don't have to have three things. So in this case, instead of having, if you will, the resolution, we simply have a charter. And the charter encompasses everything that used to be in the resolution, the charter, and then the bylaws. So we tried to simplify it so there were fewer documents for all the public entities that wanted to participate to agree with. Okay, so remember, this is the key here. I'm sorry, Commissioner French.
So, but in the other PDAs, they were created through an ILA. And this one you're saying is created by resolution. What's the difference between the two?
Commissioner French, why do you ask me these questions? So let me say what's happened.
I'm paid for.
Yeah.
When, many years ago, when we formed the West Plains PDA, the city and the county formed the West Plains Public Development Authority, one of the first ones formed, by an interlocal agreement, Commissioner French. Subsequent to that, I think the best practices provide that only one entity can establish a public development authority. And so what we did in this particular case, through the ILA, everyone said the county is the one entity, but when the county establishes a PDA, it will have the exact provisions that are in the ILA agreement. So we tried to make it using the best practice, Commissioner French, so we wouldn't have any pushback.
So I threw you a softball and you criticized me. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, that's been quite an issue that we've had to work through that.
Yeah.
Okay, so now the other critical thing to understand is under the ILA, as Commissioner Waldron alluded to, it lists, if you will, go, Ron, please, to section number 5, item number 5C, please, Ron.
Page number?
Oh,
13.
oh boy, Josh,
12 and 13.
can you,
That's part of the packets.
I apologize that because I don't have all the documents. I know. The reason this is critical is under section 5 of the ILA, it talks about anyone who signs the ILA commits to transfer these funds to the public development authority that's set up. It's really critical. So if you sign off in the ILA and you have any of these funds in your possession, the way it's set up is you agree to transfer them to the ILA. And I'm going to read them. Ron, you have them. Can you blow that up unless people have better eyes than I do? Thank you very much, Ron. Okay, so, and Amber, I'm going to read them out. You and Josh are familiar with these, and I think the board is too, but I'm going to read them just as they are in the document, if you want to.
Yeah, we're not familiar with
We're not
them, Jim,
familiar.
so
Okay.
don't
But,
assume that.
Yeah, no, I think if we wanted to focus in on 3 areas today,
Yeah,
the funding sources.
right.
Structure of the board,
Governance.
and, because most of the bylaws are similar, I believe.
We don't
together.
have any bylaws.
Oh, okay.
We don't have bylaws because that's
But the
left up.
decision of who is elected chair and
That's,
things like that.
that's all in the,
Right.
yeah.
Right, but I think those 2 items and then the term by which each entity agrees to stay in
Gotcha,
PDA.
gotcha.
Those are the 3, I think. I'm just throwing that out for consideration as we move forward this morning, that, those are the 3 areas. So why don't you, go ahead.
Yeah, Shelley, may I have you come up here and make 7 or 8 copies of this, please, right away for me, so I can hand it out to the board. It has it right on it, and I'd like to hand this out because it talks about the funding and the termination, and she'll bring that right back. Because I think, remember, the funding was put in there, not by staff who drafted the document, but it was put in by Rick, Teresa, and Gavin as a starting point.
Starting.
Amber, is that a correct
Yeah,
statement?
they basically put everything in there that could be spent on behavioral health, homelessness, housing. And I think that's the biggest, I mean, if we can agree to form it, the structure of the board, the types of funding, and the term of the agreement of how long each entity needs to stay in would be, to me, the biggest sticking points, right, that for us to discuss, but yeah, they put everything in. We actually did not discuss like the county mental health sales tax, but they put that in because it is an allowable source. So they basically put everything in there, and then, you know, we need to look through all those sources and decide if the county is would be willing to put those in or not, right? So I think that's a big topic of conversation.
So two things. One, when you're looking at the sources of funds, I know that with CDBG funds, they are targeted to specific parts of the community based upon income levels, employment levels, and all that kind of stuff. And so just to say we're going to use CDBG funds doesn't necessarily mean that those funds are going to be available for the targets we want to serve.
Right.
So that's one question. The other issue then, and I will not admit I have not read through all of the documents and stuff. So some of this stuff might have been addressed and I just didn't know about it. But the use of mental health sales tax, I think it's $11-12 million, is already being allocated in our criminal justice system and our other programs. So if we shift that money away from those programs, we got to find a way to replace it. And I don't know that we've got $11-12 million sitting in the general fund that is available to replace those dollars that are critical to the system. So that's the other
Yes.
curiosity that I have.
Yeah, and I think at this point, I mean, these documents just became available on Wednesday
Yeah.
last week.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of us have not had time to digest all of them.
Right.
So I think even you guys were at the meetings, but there weren't
we never
documents, it
saw
was
the
just
documents
discussions, so.
Correct, yeah, we did not get access to these full documents, like you
This
said,
is-
until
yeah.
last week,
This is our
correct?
first chance to really, and so no questions, not a good question at this
Okay.
point.
Yeah, because I got half a
Sounds like a
page of
teacher.
questions.
Yeah,
All the
and-
questions are good.
And I think that's
Okay.
the point for today, is to
Okay.
really start, just accumulate,
Examining it.
yeah,
Okay,
and
thank
start
you.
writing down all the questions that we
Yeah.
have, and that's why I think we wanted to do it as commissioners and not have Rick and
Yeah.
Teresa and Gavin in this time, so we could accumulate those questions and just start to formulate what those are.
Do you want me to just give you my sheet of questions?
Not yet.
No.
We're not done yet.
rattling
Oh, he's already got 10.
Thank you. And in that regard, as Amber and Josh know, in King County, remember, they used the other model, but they did the same thing. What they did was, the first year when they transferred the money, they said, you've got to use this money, new entity, in the same way that King County did it and the city of Seattle did it the previous year. Now, they just did it for 1 year, but of course, Commissioner French and the board would have other ideas. But, so that's what they did to kind of address that issue, at least in King County under their ILA approach, which is really no different than the PDA approach. So if
So they
moving forward-
basically said, continue all contracts for
Exactly.
the first year. Okay.
So
And
what
then, Jeff,
I-
I'm gonna just interrupt too. So as Amber talked about the funding, the board structure and the term, the other piece that I think is critically important is kind of where their lane starts and where their lane ends. And I, just reading through the documents, when I scan through them, went through the PowerPoint and I went through the executive summary, I'm very concerned that there's not a true start and stop, and that's something that I think is really important for us, that we need to identify what that is.
Not only the true start date, but what do we do in the transition?
Well, and
And-
I'm not talking date, I'm just talking, because they're talking about detention services.
And where's their
The
sign
scope.
boards? They're
Yeah,
talking about
okay.
consolidating location of, I'm trying to remember what it was that they wanted to co-locate detention and pretrial and all these different,
Yeah,
where
which had me-
with other, and it's like, I don't even know logistically we have the space for that. I mean, a lot of that is contingent on maybe something else that happens in November, and whether it happens or not, could maybe help facilitate that, but
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, that was definitely, it said, to provide misdemeanor detention
That was
space and
it.
access to treatment and support services.
Yeah.
Co-locate
Co-locate.
misdemeanor court probation and pretrial support services. So that's, in some ways, that's fundamental for us to even discuss funding, is to know where their
at what point do they begin providing the services? And at what point is someone out of those services?
And like affordable housing, is it just permanent supportive housing for people
Homeless.
who have come from an experience of homelessness? Or is it all affordable housing? So like that's the sideboards, I think that's really
Yeah.
important.
Well, and the other challenge we've had, and I think it was with, when we did joint communications, is how do, if part of this agreement is that we're going to shift some of our staffing, then we've got union contracts that don't align, and we've got benefit packages that don't align, we've got seniority, which is a nightmare, and we've experienced that before. So that's another quandary that I kind of go, okay, unions across the river are not like the unions here, and the Valley doesn't even have unions. So, but all of us have got different structures and compensation, seniority, and oh dear God. So I just another.
The agreement,
Yeah, no, and I think it's important just to talk about what are,
Yeah.
some of our just overall
Logistically,
concerns that then we need to discuss further, because I don't think we're gonna get to all of it today.
the agreement contemplates, Commissioner French and Amber and I discussed this morning, it contemplates that once the people sign the ILA and the county forms or creates the Public Development Authority, then there's a 90-day window. And during the 90-day window, you're reduced to writing the details of what you're just talking about. It's contemplated that as of January 1st, employees of the city and the county or any of the entities would actually, if they wanted to, if they could, transfer to the new PDA, or they can continue to be under the county's employment and the city's employment, but they actually work for the PDA. That's the way it's set up, because you're right, we know, we've had past experience about city employees wanting to become part of a new PDA like Shrek, don't we? And then Commissioner French, there's union issues, there's all those issues, but the way it's set up right now, there'd be a separate ILA between the county and the city and the PDA that address these kinds of issues. That's as specific as they got in the present documents that you have in front of you.
it took us, it took us a lot longer than 90 days to
Oh.
deal with the union issues, communication system. Not only the union issues, but seniority was a big issue because it had to, anyway.
Commissioner French, you're right on point, but we,
Commissioner.
Well, I'm just-
French.
I'm sorry.
To piggyback on that discussion though, it's like, so essentially, what is being stated is there will be no efficiencies realized by bringing all of these staff together. I mean, from a staffing standpoint, there'll be no efficiency. I mean, you're still going to need as many staff, even though you're bringing everybody together to collaborate, there'll be no efficiencies from a staffing standpoint realized.
I
Which to
can't
me
agree.
kind of
Yeah.
seems odd. I mean, there's still going to be that much of a workforce needed. I mean, it makes me think we could just end up with a large organization that has way more staff than they actually need to deliver these types of services. Usually when you see those efficiencies, when you collaborate, you bring everybody together, you're not going to need as large of a workforce to deliver those services. But this kind of state, I mean, there's no efficiencies and overhead there.
well, Commissioner Kearns, George is here. At one time, it was my understanding, the city of Spokane had approximately 20 people doing this work. My understanding was the county had approximately 5. I don't know, George is here, he probably knows the exact numbers, and he could address if there could be any economies of scale, if you will, if they were all under one. I simply don't know that issue. Maybe Amber was involved in it, maybe George knows, I don't know.
I can't speak to any efficiencies on what will or will not. There just isn't the detail there really to answer that question. But I agree with you, Commissioner. Typically, like that's part of the sales pitch is by doing this, we'll gain efficiencies.
Well, I think the city's gonna have to look at, once we get to that point, the city's gonna have to look at how they're paying for their current employees out of multiple funding streams and maybe doing more than just homeless related functions. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, George, I mean, the staff over at the city was working on both affordable housing CDBG, homelessness, I mean, a variety of different funding streams and people's jobs. We're working in multiple areas. So that's gonna take some time for the city to figure out how they would realign their staff, you know, with the funds that they agree to put towards this. But I think that's kind of getting ahead of, do we even want to form the PDA? It's hard to not talk about those things, but if we don't even want to form the PDA and agree to the terms, then we can't even get to the point of talking about staffing. So anyway.
Well, but staffing's one of the three things that's supposed to be determined up front. It's the staffing, the funding, and the, no, I'm blanking on the
The
third.
term of
The term, yeah, so I mean, those are like the three things that were sort of, that's what has to happen first.
Well,
Staffing,
in the preliminary ILA, I think it says that we agree to lend staff, but it doesn't specify how, details. Because what you're saying is it says the next phase is to determine all those details
That is correct.
and sign a final
Commissioner.
agreement around the staff.
Exactly right.
Exchange.
But in
Just
answer.
a second, Jim.
I'm sorry.
Commissioner French also had a comment.
Well, so I don't know whether you guys caught this or not, but at the end of last week, the federal court fined the state of Washington $100 million because they haven't met any of their obligations with regard to True Blood. And so now the state is going to have to significantly ramp up their response to get in compliance with the court order on True Blood. And that opens up a whole nother quandary of revenue that isn't even contemplated in this. And so we're shuffling monies around and consolidating and stuff. But as we've experienced, I mean, True Blood was one of the reasons why we were able to fund a significant part of the mental health crisis stabilization and some of our other programs and stuff. So that is a big pot of money that's going to be sitting out there that isn't even contemplated in this.
Well, but on the True Blood side, on that, you know, the state is gonna now have to do something
Well, that's what I'm saying, yes.
beyond what the funding is.
Yep.
Is like, you know, what is Eastern State Hospital gonna look like?
Mhm.
Are people that are, you know, having mental health situations, you know, where are they gonna be? I mean, that's gonna cause a whole nother issue in the legislature.
Well, and my point is that the state is going to be forced to put more money into mental health treatment that this contemplates we're going to have to do locally. And if the state is going to be bringing money to the table because the courts are saying you will do this, then how does that fit into
It
this
could be another
equation?
funding source
It could be
down
a
the
very
road.
strong funding source. It could clearly represent half, if not more, of the total funding necessary to address homelessness, because as we all have experienced, homelessness, the biggest part of that is mental illness.
I would expect, Commissioner French, if that occurs, that funding source is not addressed in this document.
No, it's not.
I would anticipate this, if we did get the funding source and it came to Spokane County, Commissioner French, I would expect that the PDA authority, separate public entity, their executive director and their board would be negotiating with Spokane County to possibly put some of that or all of it in that particular, give it to the PDA to work with to the extent they could. So I would see that's what was happening. But let me go back one step if I could
Out of our jail
to
system.
this, yeah, so.
It's potentially, but it's truly that, you know, issue is getting them out of the jail system.
That's
They're
true.
sitting in jail
That's true.
and not having their competency hearing, which should be, you know, they should be at Eastern State Hospital, getting the help that they need so they can come back for, you know, whatever.
Understood.
And then part of my point is, to piggyback on what she's saying, is if one of the sources of money for this is the mental health sales tax revenue, which addresses mental health, and the state's gonna have to come in with a whole nother pot of money to address mental health, to become compliant with the courts, what does that mean with regard to the funding of this? And, you know, so it just, you know, just one more, you know, on the.
Commissioner French, I
Yes,
think
Dave.
what Amber and Josh would say, assuming you move forward, the funding sources that I've just handed out and we'll talk about, you can limit the funding source. Remember, Commissioner Waldorf, you said this is a wish list. everything was put in here in the kitchen sink, but
But
if
not
you
True
move
Blood.
forward, you can
Yeah.
negotiate.
You found one that they didn't
They missed
identify.
one. Well, but if they, I'm sorry, just bear with me. If part of their funding source is mental health sales tax, and we end up shifting part of that to this entity, and then backfilling out of the general fund, and then so we're gonna go through a structural change about how we use those funds, and then True Blood comes on, we could be on the short end of that equation, because now we've got two sources of funds for the new entity, and the county is taking it in the shorts for part of the funds to feed some of the systems we already have in place. That's the reason why I mentioned the thing about True Blood is there's overlap. There's overlap between the sources and uses of funds. I'm done.
No, that's okay. Mike Sparrow, you want
Yeah,
to
Jim, do
comment?
they identify what staff
No,
are to be loaned?
No,
And
If-
what the impact of the
no,
resources
no.
would be?
they don't do that, Mike, because section 5C of the interlocal agreement addresses, 5D addresses staffing as follows. The intent is to transfer staff positions of the parties that are funded by the sources identified in section 5C to the authority. Employees currently in those staff positions will be given the option of moving payroll and benefits to the new authority or maintaining current payroll and benefits through the current employer. In either case, employees will report to and be accountable to the authority, its governing board, and its director on or before January 1st, 2024. So again, this was draft language put in there to address the staffing issue. Needs to be fine-tuned. It was contemplated that there'd be more details in a separate ILA, which is prepared during this 90-day window after if the Board of County Commissioners decides to create the PDA. So that's as far as we got, Commissioner French. I remember talking with Chris and other members about the staffing issue, the union issues, Shrek and all the issues we had there. So again, we can fine tune that. Now, pardon me.
Well, and I guess on the funding side, I mean, I thought the original, as discussions happened initially, that it wasn't gonna be taking more general fund funds. It was accumulating the funds that were already being spent, which mental health dollars are not already being spent there. And then they were using those to leverage other grant funding that they could go after as well. So I don't think the intent was to be taking general fund, dollars.
I think that's correct. With regard to the funding issue, board members, I had Shelley print off a first page that I've got. If you go down to section 5 on the page 1, the first page of the handout that Shelley just handed, section 5, I've listed the 5, right here, section 5, the funding sources identified in the ILA. The document just handed out, the 5 funding sources in the ILA, which would be transferred to the Public Development Authority by entities who execute the ILA. This was just a wish list. So if you look at section 5, I listed them because in the ILA, they're not in this format. So Amber, this is exactly what's listed, section 5, and you'll see, board members, under item number 5 under section 5, 8214.
There's two section 5s. Where you at?
First one.
First one?
I'm sorry,
ILA
the first
funds?
one, I'm sorry, Josh, excuse me. So those are the funding sources, and you'll see, if you look at the last line of number 5, that's the mental health sales tax. That is your dollars right now that Commissioner French has indicated. We've pretty much allocated all those out to other entities, so if we transfer those if you were to transfer this to PDA, what strings would you have attached to those to enable those funds to be used down the road for other purposes and continue using them for the same purposes? So I'm not familiar enough, Amber or George, to discuss the items under 5 because I don't know the details. I know Jeff McMorris is familiar with what some of those terms are, and he can further address them.
So what concerns me is if you look at those funding sources, but then if you look at under the second section 5B, is the intent is to transfer all But it says all,
Yeah.
federal, state, and local program funding that is currently dedicated to support affordable housing, homelessness, and behavioral health. That means that the intent would be that we would transfer all
All of it.
that sales tax.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know, again, where we stop and where they start.
Yeah.
You know, when they, you know, where is their sideboards?
And in the,
Because that's what drives that. I mean, we've got mental health dollars that are being used right now in schools. We have it, you know, for youth mental health, we have it in our court system, you know, all of that wording, when they have all, you know, we have other needs, you know, even in CDBG, like Al says, you know, I've got small towns that use some of the CDBG funding for, you know, water, for sewer, for sidewalks, you know, for all of that, you know, we, you know, it just all can't go to, it's not all being used currently for homelessness, you know, and so that's my concern right now as I look at this ILA, is they're trying to be everything. And I'm really concerned as to, you know, we're not just isolating, we're not, I mean, there's a combination of working with the cities and the counties to, as we move forward with homelessness, you know, where we do those handoffs, but I mean, otherwise they become basically like a county or a city, you know, for a lot of intents and purposes, other than, you know, water and sewer.
Well, Commissioner Waldorf and Josh were involved in some of these discussions, and certainly, if you decide to move forward, these are negotiation terms, and with the board giving direction to staff, we can move forward to condition any or all of these funds in whatever fashion you would want them conditioned, to the extent that we have a consensus, and I don't know, Amber and Josh, you kind of dealt with it.
I also wanna add it, so the funding seems to have evolved. I mean, when we first got into this discussion, out of the gate, we were told that this whole thing would be funded by just the state and federal dollars that go to this. Then that kind of evolved into, well, we'll fund it with everything but your general fund. And so then it kind of turned into that. And to the point too about Commissioner Waldorf's and my involvement in this, I think the only things that we agreed on as a group there was that a PDA was the mechanism that we thought would work best, as opposed to a nonprofit. And those were pretty much the only two options that were discussed, a nonprofit or a PDA. And it was very strongly recommended to the working group that a PDA was the best fit, and there we had a general consensus of the group. Other than that, we had a pretty good deep dive on the makeup of the PDA board. And I think we came to close to consensus on that. There was still some differing of opinions on, you know, should there be additional small cities reps? Should the city of Spokane have 2 representatives while no other jurisdiction does? But I mean, we got close on that, and the makeup of the 8 non-electeds. I don't really think we had a good deep dive or any type of agreement on any other part of what we're going through here. So there was PDA, and the makeup of the PDA board was about the extent of our 90-day involvement on that group. So please, I mean, I'm hearing a lot of Amber and Josh can speak to that. Amber and Josh were a part of that. Amber and Josh were not a part of most of what's in here. So I just want to be clear that on where we're at. A lot of this
With research.
I saw for the first time last week with everybody else. So.
And it was a good exercise, I think, to research all the dollars that could be put towards the effort. And now we need to go, what is reasonable? What's a good starting point, right? And put up those, you know, what do you call them, sideboards around this, what the entity could reasonably start doing. So just know that
Yeah, well,
that's
and
what,
not
that's,
even just, you know, I'm not seeing where their, you know, what their real role is. I mean, it's like, they're saying for homelessness, and they just want everything, and they wanna do it all, and it's like, that's not, I mean, so it's like, I feel like we're the details of this are ahead of figuring, I mean, that we need to determine that, for us to really determine what staffing needs would be, you know, because like, I can't have all my see, all my housing staff, go over, when they're handling CDBG funds that do need to still go out to the community other than just homelessness. So it's like, I can't have just that whole department just suddenly disappear. So, Mike, I know you have
And that's, Jim, if I
comment.
could finish my question. So is it creating 3 different pools the city would have? Does it alleviate the county from the responsibility of the loan staff that would go to this PDA? Or would we have to operate both of them at the same time? We'd loan staff to them, and on the county, we'd still be operating with the same staff. Because what I see is a shortage of staff already and creating another issue for us.
Man,
And so that's, on the outside looking in, that's what I see, Jim. So,
I don't know that I know the answer to that question, Mike, and that's why we're having these workshops
Yeah.
so that we can fine tune that stuff.
so, the 5 of 5, it says all, look, this piggybacking on what you were talking about, Commissioner Cooney, all local sales tax funding that is assessed and collected by any of the parties under the RCWs, that for us is mental health, that it could be the ballot measure for the criminal justice system, sales tax, could be the low income housing sales tax, could be 5309 sales tax. So there's 4 sales taxes that would be collected at the local level that the county could do, and all of that would go to this entity based upon that sentence.
And Commissioner French, I understand what you're saying, but again, the board can negotiate any of
I
these tools,
understand,
but you're
yeah.
right, this is very broad. Because
Very
the mental
broad.
health tax, I think it's $16 million a year we get from it. I don't know what it is, but it's a big amount of money right now.
On mental health?
I think it's 16, I don't know.
Well, mental health, yeah, mental health currently is around 15, 16 million. But multiply that by 4.
Yeah,
You're
understood.
talking about $60 million a year just going to this based upon total revenue available.
And Commissioner French has articulated there, some of those other charges they've identified are the surcharges that Vicky charges right now for filing documents. And so that money, I think you use for other purposes, but they want that too. But again, we just put these in there. We were asked to put them in there. And Josh, Commissioner Kearns, I apologize if I attributed these funds to you.
It's all right.
I can tell you the mental health tax was added 2 days before the documents were finalized. I just told it was put it in.
Well, and there was another thing that was brought up in that work group, and I guess I'm glad I didn't see it make the final, or this draft here, was, but there was an attempt that they would like the county to implement an additional 1/10 of 1% sales tax for the affordable house, I think it's called 1590, the 1590 that only the city of Spokane has imposed. They want that to go countywide and then hand all that money over to this effort as well.
Well, and then you got.
We've already made the decision to
So
not
then you got the
impose that.
5309 money on top of that. So that's one no one's levied yet, but it's clearly a conversation. The legislature authorized it. That's a legislative decision. That's not a vote.
Which one was that?
I think it's called 5309. It's money that you can levy legislatively, the council, the
1509,
board.
is it 1509?
1509 or 5309, I think it's
Well,
one of those.
What the city has.
What's the purpose?
Well, 1590.
1590.
1590, that's
Yeah,
right,
So
thank
that's
you.
the
Sorry.
one
That's
that
the one that
a
we
couple
were
years
just
ago
talking
that we decided not to
Not
act
to
on,
do, right.
and then the city did.
And we didn't have
Passed.
time to put on the ballot because we, the way the timing came to us, and so we didn't do it, and then the city did it.
When it was like summer of 2020, so there were some big things going on.
That's on low income housing.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it
No,
also
the
is behavioral health.
5309 money is additional, it's an additional 1% that we can do without going to a vote of the people for mental health. And the legislature established it this last year. I heard it from Teresa and Gavin, that's available to us as well, and that we can just establish that as councilmatic, I guess is the term. I was
Yeah, I don't.
You
know.
might
I was
be-
surprised.
You might be talking about the same thing, because the 1590 housing, you read the statute, can also go to behavioral health.
But that came out like
That was a
3
couple
years
years
ago.
ago, 3 or 4 years
This is
ago.
new.
He's
This
saying
is
this
new.
is something
They
this
they
last
were telling me it was
this year.
and I-
something that just was done this year.
Oh, okay.
Now, maybe I misunderstood what she said, but she was pushing that real hard. Teresa was.
Yeah, I'm not
I'm
familiar.
gonna bop over to the Trent Bridge. Do we have executive sessions expected?
None that need to happen today.
Okay, all right. I'll zoom in to the conversation.
Well, Commissioner CUNY, in the document under section 5, the first section 5, I actually took the sources of funding. We've kind of talked about those. There are 1 through 5 of them, and I think everyone is seeing those. And I don't know, I'm not fluent in discussing all those. I know we have Jeff here and I have George here. If we need more dialogue, I don't know if you want to talk about that more or if we've discussed that. I mean, you gotta have a workshop on the funding almost to fine tune it so staff knows what you want us to put in a document to send back or to talk with the other entities. I don't know.
Well, I think, you know, in my mind, the funding, we need to know what we're currently giving and putting aside for homelessness. You know, because I think we don't, I mean, we use the money that we get from the state now, or the feds. We've chosen to keep that ourselves and not turn that over to the city, and we contracted that out. You know, so I don't know currently sitting here what funding we are, you know, giving, you know, and providing to homelessness. I don't know what our contracts are, and what we're doing. I know, you know, that's one of the things, you know, that when we decided to pull it back from the city, and directly allocate ourselves, that's one group of funding. But beyond that, I don't know how much we're doing in the homeless, you know, area.
It's approximately $4 million a year that we're currently investing in homeless services. I think the challenge becomes extrapolating that out across like homeless prevention, emergency shelter, so on and so forth. I will say our portfolio is primarily focused on homeless prevention, less so on emergency sheltering.
So which is part of that, where are the sideboards? Where is this group starting and stopping? Because when I read the executive summary, it is so broad that, again, they would almost be doing everything. And you know, so what's the purpose of our housing authority? What's the purpose of, you know, other organizations that we have, you know, within the community? I don't know, that's where I thought it was emergency housing, emergency homelessness. You know, and when I toured in Houston, that's what Houston was doing. It was the emergency homelessness, you know, and how they were leading from there to shelter space. It wasn't trying to do everything ahead of that, but you know, I don't know. I mean, maybe they didn't discuss that with us. So that's where I'm just really confused. And then, like I said, when I read the, you know, the part on, you know, once we start to get into detention services, that's a whole nother thing that I wouldn't be comfortable having this group manage. You know, and when you're talking misdemeanors, it's the cities, you know, for the most part, you know, in some of the, you know, in the county as well. But it's like, then that's a whole nother thing of, you know, each one is handling their misdemeanors differently. So how does that evolve into a PDA? So that's where I'm reading this, I'm really confused as to what the true purpose of this is, because it's not going to be able to be everything to everyone. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you live the staff at the city in here. I mean, reading this executive summary, I mean, that takes you guys way beyond what your current capacity was.
Yeah,
and knowledge and expertise and all of that.
I think one of the challenges that I see right now is presented is what, and you see that within the first 2 years, reducing homelessness by 40%. Like, what are the primary mechanism or interventions that will be used to be able to achieve that? Because that's gonna tell you a lot of where your investments are gonna ultimately end up going as you prioritize funding requests for proposals and those sorts of things. So I think that's something that would be really interesting to see kind of how we go about, like if that's truly the goal that this new entity, if formed, is tasked with in its first 2 years of operation. That's going to be a heavy investment there. And I think one thing that I've seen over the years working in this arena is some of those funds that have been used historically, like certainly in Spokane County, to help out the city of Fairfield or the town of Fairfield or the city of Deer Park with different infrastructure needs that they have that just doesn't really work with their capital budgets. Those sorts of things can be sidetracked by the intensive financial investments into certainly chronic emergency homeless situations. So that's just something I've seen over time that you definitely want to make sure that you've got good boundaries and objectives that you're trying to meet so that you don't end up losing some of those resources.
Right, or like helping Sewer the Valley where we're providing, low-income loans, through CDBG. So I mean, so those are things that are still, necessary things for our community and the county, that we, I want to ensure we do preserve.
Well, and to that point, I think Spokane Valley has got a project that they are relying on CDBG funds to be able to fund, and they need to make a commitment on that project this week. And so they're going, we're holding up, the county is holding up the release of those CDBG funds to them, and so they are kind of high-centered on a project that they say is critical to their city. And I don't know whether that's the case or not, but I've had 3 council members from the valley approach me and say, why are you holding the funds up? I don't know.
Yeah, and we got a letter just last week that, last week, maybe the week before, that the valley did take action to stay with us as it comes to CDBG. But they do have concern that, I talked to a couple of the council members, some of their staff after the presentation, and they were worried. Because the presentation on this whole effort, what I gleaned from it was it's kind of the assumption that all CDBG dollars would go to this effort, and I can't support that. I think that would severely harm our small communities that do rely on that money. And we've got that advisory board that sends the recommendations to us on what to fund. I don't know if in my time as a commissioner, I don't think we've ever awarded all the funds to one applicant, where it's all just gone to one. It's usually spread like 10 to 20 different projects kind of around the area. And this is the assumption that this effort is so better than everybody that all the funds are just gonna go to them in perpetuity. And it's like, we can't make that promise.
Well,
We can't
Commissioner
agree
Kearns,
to that.
but the way it was set up from a legal perspective only is, when these funds go to them, they have to use the same process that we had to use. We're just,
Right, but their
But
process
they're not
isn't
gonna do
be helping-
infrastructure.
Yeah,
say one more time?
their process will not be helping the small towns.
I don't know that isn't true.
Unless it's related to homelessness. So, and we fund a lot of things that
Understood.
have zero to do with
I can't-
homelessness. Sidewalks, sewer, those aren't homeless issues. And so
Yeah,
all of
understood.
those types of things for our small communities would go away.
And we did help with a lot of those with our ARP dollars.
Yes, understood.
So the need may not be as great for the next couple of years, but then as you know, then in the future, it's gonna be back and they'll be relying on those dollars.
I would comment on one thing, Commissioner CUNY, that you raised, the sideboard issue. The ILA says that the purpose is to coordinate homeless services, and homeless services are defined as, means shelter, day centers, hygiene facilities, behavioral health services, housing and related services to assist individuals and families experiencing homelessness or who are in imminent risk of experiencing homelessness. So if you look at the charter itself, board members, under Article 5, it says it's homeless services, and then we define those. I'm not supporting, I'm just telling you what it says. So there are some sideboards to it, Commissioner CUNY, and some sideboards.
So maybe there, but certainly not in their executive summary.
Oh, I can't speak to that, I
Which-
didn't prepare
Which
that.
then is
Right.
leading me down a whole nother path.
Yeah.
You know, that it's, you know, that they're not clear then, cause
I can't address that. I know that Mr. Romero would be more than happy to, if Scott or someone asked him to come here and speak to the board if you wanted him to, I'm sure, or Teresa Sanders or Gavin Cooley.
Cause Jim, if we, I mean, so this is part of the executive summary. You guys have it, so it's the 1, 2, 3, 4. Kind of the fifth page says, what are our top priorities? You know, and that's where, you know, they're talking about the 40% reduction in homeless, unsheltered homeless. You know, health established integrated resource center. But then that's where this integrated resource center is further defined with criminal justice. You know, and then provide treatment and beds for mental health and addiction. I mean, so, you know, shift current shelter model to a triage support model with 72-hour throughput. So some of those things are like, are they thinking they're taking over a crisis stabilization center and that's now under their umbrella? I mean, are they, you know, again, when you talk about provide misdemeanor detention space, how, they don't have, I mean, we don't have space, let alone how do they have space? You know, and again, that's what the diversion facility, the stabilization center is for, is to provide that. Co-locate misdemeanor court, probation, court/probation and pretrial support services. Okay, we don't have enough funding now for all of our pretrial support services that we'd like to do, let alone then how would they be doing that differently? And then I look at too, I mean, so I want to try to figure this out, but I'm just, you know, those are the things that are, you know, have me puzzled that we need to know, again, what is their true purpose? Where are they starting with people? Who's the person that's coming into their agency? You know, and then how are they helping along the way? And I love Teresa, you know, and Elle knows this from, you know, we were doing the stabilization center. It's all these great theories and ideas, but we got to get to the reality, you know, and you look at, you know, yeah, I kind of delayed that, but you look at that funding model and we made it happen. So we're not providing general fund dollars into it, you know, and so we've got to be thoughtful and purposeful, you know, to not be all this, we're going to be everything to everybody. Let's really talk about what can they really do? Because coming together and being more efficient and effective is going to be better. But not, you know, kind of to Josh's point, not if we're, you know, having the same staffing level, you know, and it's the same people, are we really making a change in doing that? So I don't know, those are some of my overall concerns that I think, you know, probably the next time we need to have, you know, Teresa and Rick and everyone in here, you know, but I think we needed to have this discussion first to really talk about it. And even Shrek, I mean, some people think that we've allowed all of our funds to go to Shrek. We still have the ability to determine, we did put the sideboard on that budget is supposed to come to us and we approve the budget because we are the ones, the electeds are the ones that are responsible for those funds to the public. And I don't see this being any different. Just to say that I'm gonna turn all these funds over, I still am accountable to the public for how those funds are spent, whether it's in my entity or in a different entity. You know, and it's the PDAs are, you know, S3R3. I mean, there could be people that could be really upset with how S3R3 is spending our funds and could come after all of us when I'm not having as much authority, but we have Commissioner French sitting on that, providing that basis to know that those funds are being spent appropriately.
And there's more public individuals on those PDAs than non, so there is a level of accountability. You have 2 electeds, and then you have, I mean, so I'll use any PDA, for example. Yeah. I'm on that from the county, Scott's there. You know, if people, and then there's Michael Cathcart, and then Marlene Feist. So, I mean, you have 2 public individuals who are accountable to the taxpayers, and then we have 3 that are not. We have 3 individuals, citizens from the community. This is the complete opposite. It's 5 electeds and 8 non-electeds. And as I read through it, I'm a little confused on how those original 8 get appointed, because it says that it's just one second, go back.
It's on a
I think
recommendation
a
from the
recommendation
ED
from the executive director. So
to the full board.
so I assume those 5, I mean, they're defined, so those 5, can they only pick from a list provided by the executive director? And if so, it's like, well, how do
But
I mean, then
traditionally,
you're-
your executive director is not the one providing the board input because they
Yeah.
oversee that person.
Yeah,
So you
they're their
shouldn't have
boss.
the executive director
Yeah.
being part of that process.
I don't know,
haven't read
commissioners, how Rick Romero came up with the governing body of the Public Development Authority. But Commissioner Kearns is correct in what the document presently reads.
Yeah, so they're appointed from a list
Yeah.
provided by the executive director.
Right.
So yeah, no, that's.
And we've seen how difficult it is to appoint to boards. I mean, some high profile board, you don't always get a lot of applicants, and so,
And to get back to what Mary was talking about, I think they do envision that the Community Corrections Center and some of the programs that are gonna be administered through that facility would be under their control, as opposed to being under the county's control with regard to Sparber and the board. So I think there is an expectation that we're gonna have to work our way through.
So, and I think, just a second, George, because what we're doing isn't working. We all know that.
Yeah.
So we want to do something different. This gives us a framework to look
Yeah.
at, but I think probably the first question is really what those sideboards are.
Yeah.
Because that's a piece that Houston isn't trying to do detention. Houston isn't trying, so.
No.
And we can be innovative, but to me, it's when this group can be partnering with our other services, and helping provide those programs that might be beneficial and helpful, but so George.
Yeah, one last thing I wanted to make a comment about is just the overall startup costs. And I don't think I think there's an assumption that there's enough admin funds through these different grant sources to be able to cover 100% of whatever the startup costs are. And the City of the Valley did an excellent analysis of what it would cost for them to run their own entitlement program recently. And so I think it's just really important to also be aware of startup costs and where those funding sources are going to come from to be able to get this entity up and off the ground. Just being able to hire an executive director to be able to start putting the pieces together, that's going to be a fairly expensive cost and something that may not be eligible for those grant funds upfront. So.
Right. No, because startup would not, and we saw with the other PDAs. I mean, we've provided startup funding to help support those PDAs. So that's a really good call out to where that. So I guess I would just reiterate that it took us 6 months to sign a letter saying we were all interested in in having them move forward to look at what this would be. That this is going to take. It's still a process. That it's going to take us, that it's, they wanted us to sign this in 60 days, or 90.
I believe it's 60.
90 days, they wanted to have everything done in 90 days.
So I don't see that happening. I mean, I'm just going to be realistic.
I think it was 60 for us to agree, 90 to then get everything
That's
buttoned
correct.
up, formed, and ready to go by January 1st.
I mean, I think we're seeing that their presentation hasn't defined what their true purpose is, and what their funding is going to really be doing. And I think too, we have to figure out if it's it's 4 million, that's, where's that 4 million that currently being used with it, and how that then goes to there. So we're comfortable saying, yeah, 4 million of our dollars, yeah, we're able to put that over. But I don't know where those dollars are yet, so I think we've got to do that analysis, which that's why just to say, oh, we're going to take all of this isn't realistic. And we as elected officials could never agree to that at this point in time. I don't want to speak for you guys, I apologize. But I couldn't, because again, the citizens are, expect that we're the ones that, we're elected to manage those dollars.
Well, and the premise was, we could do everything within the existing funding structure. I guess what we didn't have a clear understanding about is, when you say it's existing funding structure, what do you mean by that? Because like you say, mental health it's a funding structure, but it's also all fully allocated.
Well, and I tried to caution, Erin had put together a spreadsheet during COVID of what all potential dollars that could be used for homelessness. And I think every time they were here, kind of cautioned everybody that that's not all that's available.
Yeah.
That's again saying that we're gonna then not do anything else for the community, which is not what our citizens expect. There's services that are being provided that they still expect.
So would it be okay if I just kind of read real quick some of my other questions so that we can, because I think,
No, I'm sure
I
there's
think we're,
people from the public listening, and so, yeah.
we're kind of, I think, coalescing around some concerns, but, one, I still, and if it has been produced, I haven't seen it, so it might be but I'd like to review and see a proposed budget and sources and uses of funds. Let's get to your question, be very specific about, if you're gonna take mental health sales tax, okay, tell us, and then we gotta figure out how we're gonna replace that, or not. Alignment of resources and issues to address, use of mental health sales tax revenue, timetable for setup and resource allocation. Just the union contracts alone, going based upon SHREC, God, I think that took us like 6 to 9 months to get the contracts aligned and stuff. And so that alone can be a big, and then a transition structure and timeline. Structure for debt, who's gonna guarantee it and who's gonna issue it, and why do we need debt? I thought we were doing all of this out of existing revenues. And then I'm very, very concerned about the union contracts, just based upon what we had with SHREC, and knowing that there's a difference between the city and the county that was one of the biggest challenges we had with SHREC, is overcoming that.
That's why the city didn't join for,
Yeah.
2 years?
Yeah, but
Only part of the city still at this point.
But all the wrestling we did to try and satisfy him, we never could get there. Some would argue we're still not there.
Right.
But anyway, so those are the big issues that I'm still wrapping my head around, so thank you.
Well, and as you speak to the debt issue, and I have not read through the documents, this has been conversations I've had, is that they can issue debt, as you said, but PDA can, and then once they issue debt, then we can't.
No
until-
entity can withdraw from the PDA until the debt or a loan has been paid off.
So.
Page 12 of 91.
Which means the organization is there in perpetuity
Yeah, so
if you allow debt.
Provided no city may withdraw its participation in the authority until all bonds issued by the authority or obligations to pay debt services are paid in full. Provided further termination of the authority may be, and then it lists away. But that's what we have for the other PDAs too. If they issue bonds, then you've extended the life of that PDA at least as long as the bond issue. So it's the same thing,
And does
but.
the PDA get to choose to issue the bonds? Doesn't come back to the entities to.
Well, but as we
So
know,
we don't know, because none of them have yet. None of them have, so I don't know.
Well, actually, we have not issued bonds, but we did enter into debt, because the SVR3 has a loan with Wheatland Bank for building the Prime Air hangar. So we do have debt there, but I think it's like a 5 or 7 year note. Yeah, it's got a balloon payment on it and stuff, so, you know, it's not 20 or 30 years, it's like a 5 or 7 year note. But the difference is the county didn't guarantee it. The city didn't guarantee it. The PDA guaranteed it off of its existing revenues. So
Right,
we're not
that's-
on the hook. If the PDA fails, that's so bad. But we don't
Yeah.
guarantee that debt.
Or, but the PDA was an initial 20-year PDA.
Yeah.
To then be determined whether to renew or not.
Yep.
And now if the PDAs can do that, then they're determining they're renewing without being able to come back to the authorities
Well,
for that conversation.
Well, and keep in mind, when we created the PDAs, we wanted them to grow and we didn't want, I mean, just a little bit of a review, but the city was hung up on 20 years. And we were going, wait a minute, if we're going to be developing new buildings and stuff, we're going to incur debt. We don't want to, I mean, effectively what happens is in year 10, you don't do anything because you can't incur debt. You won't be, so that we deliberately made that structure that way so that we wouldn't be hanging out in case the city or the county ended up having to guarantee the loan. As it turns out, the only loan has been that the city and the county didn't play any role in it, but that
You
was
know,
the
to
other part of
Commissioner
it.
CUNY's point though, if the PDA did want to bond, would,
Then it has to come back to us,
well, city and county?
city
No.
and county.
Well,
Because
they
I
have to
assume
go
we
where-
would issue the bond, because we have the capacity,
That-
right?
Well,
It
They have right
depends upon
issue-
how you guarantee the bond.
that's exactly right.
Because we're not going to, I would assume, the county's not going to incur all the debt on a bond without some kind of collateral guarantee from the city to help share in that debt. We're not going to carry 100% of the debt without their help. That's the way it is with the airport and a bunch of other stuff too.
Commissioner French, so if a PDA is formed, you are correct, they have the ability to borrow money and issue debt. The question will be, will anyone buy the bonds without the county or the city backing the bonds? Because you never know
Yeah.
what the sales tax revenue will be, what the revenue sources. And so then the question, Commissioner French, is, my recollection is the city of Spokane, without a vote of the people, can't issue bonds. The
That's right.
county can issue bonds,
That's right.
so they
Charter
would have
doesn't
to
allow
look
them.
to us to back the bonds, and then it would be a decision for the Board of County Commissioners. Unless some entity would issue bonds based upon their stream of revenue, and I can't imagine anyone doing that without the county's full faith and credit, Commissioner.
That's why we went to a private bank.
Yeah.
And just
Yeah,
got a private
exactly.
loan, but got the loan based upon our assets.
Yeah.
And stuff, but, you know, the PFD, I mean, we issue the bonds on the
Right.
PFD and stuff, we guarantee that, we don't have the city there.
No,
But,
so I'm just concerned,
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
coming back to this, I'm just concerned because, you know, I would like to, you know, figure out something, because again, I don't want us to keep beating our head against the wall, that if we figure out something, but I think we've got to have a means to be, you know, give them 2 to 3 years at the most to see if they can, you know, come up with these, you know, 40% reduction in unsheltered homeless. I mean, what does that really, you know, what does that really mean?
Yeah.
Can they really do it? Again, they, you know, in order to do that in a timeframe, because they're talking about the recommended 2-year objective, you know, are these things. You have to be pretty planned out to do that, and we're still at a very theoretical perspective.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to have, I mean, this is where they were coming up with the theory. I thought they were coming up with more details, you know, but we do have to see a budget. I mean, I required that for the smaller, or the stabilization center, you know, and the small arms range. It's like, we've got to see, in order for us to make a informed decision, we have to see what that budget is gonna look like, you know, how they're gonna spend the dollars, how you know, what they really anticipate for true revenue coming in. Because what I don't wanna see is what happened over in Seattle and King County, where the housing authority, or the homeless authority executive director resigned because he suddenly said he wanted $12 billion, and that wasn't, I don't know if you knew this, so it's a Seattle Times article, he wanted $8 billion for construction and $4 billion to rent it. You know, that's not realistic. I mean, we have to be realistic as to what we're really gonna be able to do. because we don't have endless money. I mean, there isn't billions of dollars to do this, and so I guess, and back to, yeah, you can criticize me again in the future for the stabilization center, how it took me so long to get on board, but
Mr. Cuny,
it took me a while, because we just needed to get those numbers. I mean, the theory is great, and we knew the theory was great.
Yeah.
But it's like, until we actually get some detail to know that the numbers can work, I mean, that's the CPA in me, it's hard, and when I don't know what the true where they're starting, so if someone's in homelessness, are they going to that authority? Or are they starting with, it's kind of where their sideboards are, it's like because I thought it was on the emergency sheltering side and then forward. I didn't think it was on the prevention side, but I don't know, and then, like I said, when detention became part of it and the whole criminal justice system, that concerns me, because then that's gonna be confusing to the public as we're moving forward, and talking about our measure in November, because we're pretty clear, what the measure is for. This would, then determine, make different.
Well, of course, the executive summary, Commissioner Cuny alluded to, is not part of the document. It's not part of the PDA or the ILA. I have not read the executive summary. The first I've ever heard about law and justice being part of it. I'm telling you, it isn't within the bedposts of what's in the present document. But I don't care what they say in there, what the goals are. If it's not part of the Public Development Authority charter, which is attached, it's not government, it has no purpose whatsoever.
But I need the executive summary to
Understand.
match.
Well, then, that's a different story, because they don't match, obviously, do they? And
No.
they're apples and oranges, it sounds to me, and I'm not familiar with any of that. I didn't prepare the executive summary, nor have I read it. But Mr. Romero and Teresa and Mr. Cooley, I'm sure can elucidate on how you're gonna match the two.
Yes. Oh, Mike was gonna make a comment. Is that okay?
I was gonna say, their perspective too on who's being arrested or misdemeanors. And so we have to keep that in the light of what we're doing, because we have a different focus. And that's overcrowded and just, not to say that the misdemeanor crime is not important. It's just that we're being full right now with felons. And some of those misdemeanors have felonies along with them. So I would really want to look at the numbers and what they're carving out from that perspective to see where it's headed.
Well, and like I said, when it said provide misdemeanor detention space.
But yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Access to treatment and
So,
support services, it's like,
yeah,
that's a whole nother,
right,
yeah, that, I mean,
yeah. Not that I don't think we should.
that
be
is not
partners.
the
Yeah.
experts, we're putting this together for the experts in the homeless. So I don't know, that's where I just, like, it really confused me
Yeah.
with that, so I'm sorry.
So, well, I was just gonna say, I mean, your example of the stabilization center, I mean, we had a lot of detail on how it would operate, what it would do, how we would get those end results. I mean, it was a step by step on how, I mean, so we knew that was gonna work. But no, but with this, I mean, out of the presenter's own mouths at the presentation, they said, we're telling you the what, which is the PDA, not the how. So, I mean, that's a big leap of faith that we're gonna agree to do the what before we know what the how is. How are they going to get the 40% reduction? How are they going to deliver services? How are they going to operate within the budget that we don't know? How are they going to, to get the metrics? How are they going to meet the priorities that are laid out? None of that
Yeah.
is a part of the discussion yet. So I hate to be the negative one here on that, but there's just so much we don't know yet. So, I mean, it's tough.
And of course, the PDA governing body is the only body that can really address that, and they're not even formed yet.
Yeah, and in order to find out the how, we have to say yes and assemble that board.
Yeah,
So,
Yeah. Commissioner Jordan, you've been very quiet.
Yeah, I've been listening and I just want to add a few thoughts. I think these are all really good questions. I want to zoom out a little bit, the bigger picture, because I wasn't in the work groups. I thought the meeting was really interesting. It was well attended, hundreds of community members there. What I found most striking was just the outcomes that we have now in Spokane versus communities like Houston, where they have seen significant progress. And so I think we need to focus on, as we go forward, maybe talking more about the how, talking more about the scope, all these things, the budget. How can we get better outcomes along the lines of other communities that have figured out a way to do well? So I'm appreciative of all these efforts that the group made. And I really, as I think we all do, view it as a starting point, right? They throw some ideas out there, put it all in, and it's really a challenge, I think, to all of us then to take that and wrestle with it and try to come out with something better than we have now. So I hope that's where we all are, and I think it's where we all are, but I think all of these funding, budget, scope, staffing are big, important questions that we're gonna have to wrestle with and figure out. And I'm just hopeful that we can identify some next steps. I know Commissioner Waldrop put something in the chat about some next steps. But I really think, I was, despite all the questions and concerns, I was encouraged that there's this movement in the community challenging us to do better, find ways to work together, and other communities have done it. Maybe we can avoid some of the pitfalls of Seattle and find a successful model. But you know, the time frame may not be realistic. It may need more work. But I think the last 90 days have been a productive exercise in brainstorming a better system.
so if I could just add, so I'm glad you brought up the thing. So they had a slide that did compare the, you know, just some key jurisdictions that they kind of used as comparables, and kind of per 100,000 of population, the amount of homeless that we have in our community. So these don't actually match up with point in time. So I don't know I don't know where these numbers actually come from. If you times that by 5.5, you know, to get to our, you know, 550,000 population. So I don't actually know what number they're utilizing in there. But you know, I asked the question several times in our work group, and I even texted it in to the hotline when we were at there to see if I could get an answer, and I still don't have an answer. So, you know, when you look at these other, so, you know, they talked about the what, so they're not going to talk about the how, but it's like, I think another one is the why. You know, why does Spokane have such a large homeless population? It's like, is it something we are doing? Is it something we are not doing? Is it policy driven? Is it land use driven? Is it service driven? Is it lack of service that's doing? I mean, why is our number so much higher than Tacoma, Pierce, Boise, Ada County, Houston, which they're saying is actually 3 counties, and then San Diego County? You know, those are the ones they pegged us up on this graph. But it's like, why is our homeless population so large? And I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. I don't know. And so, and I don't know if this effort will ever truly answer that question. So.
Want to be, yes, I think one of the questions is where are the numbers coming from? How are they determining those numbers? Is a good question.
Yeah, because these don't line up with point in time, I don't think.
No, I don't think so, because we didn't have.
Maybe they, I didn't think the point in time number was that big.
4,000 point in time counted homeless.
Or well, no, this would be, I don't know. I don't think these match up with point in time.
Yeah. So.
And actually, we still don't even have the final full report on the 2023 point in time count. It's only like kind of half the data has been released. I haven't seen the breakdown on sort of, you know, when they ask the question of, you know, what was your last permanent address? That is not out there. I know it's out for 22, but the 23, that's not out there. They've really only provided a handful of data sets or data points based on the point in time, the 2023 point in time count, and it's not nearly as comprehensive of what's out there for 2022.
Can you pull up Amber's chat and read it to us? Is that what it just, okay, she said I have to jump off, but I'd be willing to work with another commissioner to take the comments from today and work through concerns and come back next Monday to discuss specific sections of the ILA in more detail. I think before we do that, I mean, it's like, I see it as, I mean, we could have, I mean, do we think the next step is to have Rick and Teresa and Gavin come to talk to us? Because I don't know what their role is now, you know, versus who's, you know, now going to move forward with this to help answer these questions. Because again, I think the scope, you know, that sidebar question is really the first and foremost question that needs to be answered, you know, and it needs to, you know, just because it's in the ILA doesn't mean that we've all agreed to it either. But I think that's the real question that we've got to identify, Commissioner Jordan.
I'm wondering if, I'm certainly happy to see them come back. I think we may need to transition from an attitude of they and what are they recommending to what do we want and how are we driving this discussion. So I might suggest or ask the question if we could designate a staff person to kind of be our point on this from a policy perspective, and perhaps certain commissioners to remain engaged in the details and kind of come back. I think we need to designate clearly who's driving this project for the county in terms of us, and not relying so much on those guys to kind of answer the questions that we have. They can certainly give their input on what their intent was in the documents, but that would be my suggestion.
I do want to point out, I stand corrected, that I think these are point in time count numbers they're using that. Because if you take 438 times 5.5, gets you just slightly above what the 2023 overall point in time count number is, which is 2390. So, good, but yeah, there's a lot missing from the current point in time count presentation that was there in the 2022 presentation, but it's just not there in the 2023. It's pretty brief, but.
So Scott, thoughts as we talk about staff?
Well, there's a couple of things that have been going through my mind. You've raised a lot of good questions around how dollars get used today from the various sources. And you pointed out, not all those dollars today are used specifically for homeless services. Take our mental health funds IT in the courts, it funds mental health in the jail, it funds a variety of mental health programs that Justin and his team does through community services. Again, not necessarily on the homeless side. Some of the things that George's team does, while there's some homeless prevention and some emergency shelter funding, there's affordable housing that's not just for homeless, it's for the community as a whole. So if the commissioners were to contemplate moving those, how does it still cover the broad array of services that are being provided today? I think it's a really challenging one to have to talk through. Part of what Commissioner Kearns brought up earlier is the Valley, and one of the things George has been working with the Valley on is their 3-year consortium agreement. It's all these funds, and historically the all of the jurisdictions outside of the city of Spokane have been part of this consortium agreement, and it kind of lays out how the funds will be spent. It comprises the HDCBA committee, which reviews the recommendations. It's the CDBG, it's the HHAA dollars, all those things that take place. So the Valley's been really concerned about which direction they go. They've been, do we go with an entitlement program for our city, which takes a long time to set up? Do they sign on to another 3-year agreement with the county to provide those things? What happens if they do that and then some decisions are made to move dollars into another entity, how does that impact the valley? And that has some weighting on that, their evaluation, their decision process for us. So it's been really challenging.
Well, and they did provide the letter that they are gonna be still
They did.
staying.
Yes.
But I think, yes, as part of our district, I have discussions with them as well, that, their concerns to me were, you're just gonna give all the dollars to the homeless authority, I'm like, no. Or that has not been discussed amongst the commissioners, was never the intent. I mean, I said, I've always been clear that those are potential dollars that could all go to it, yes, but are not gonna all go to it. I mean, again, because thought was it's within our current structure, what homeless dollars are going there. So anyway, sorry to interrupt, but
No.
yeah, I was pretty clear at the Valley that I personally, and I could only speak for myself, not one of five, but that, I never would intend for all that to go away, nor would I intend for all of our staff to go over to this authority, because we would still need staffing to help manage, those other funds.
And that's consistent with what we've shared with them as well. It's just the unknown. It's like there's been no discussions up until today really with regards to the commissioners, how they would envision being part of this, what funding would go, what funding wouldn't go. It was unfortunate timing because the consortium agreement expires here pretty soon. And so they were forced with having to make a decision without the knowns of, okay, then what decisions are going to be made that might impact this consortium agreement. So that's just a couple of observations that I've had with this as well. I do think there's that the some time with the commissioners in an upcoming meeting that goes through the uses of the dollars, uses of mental health, uses of the funds that George oversees, to give you a sense of where dollars are going, what the eligible uses are, because not all the funds that George's team oversees are eligible for just homeless prevention or emergency shelters. They have very specific eligible uses for how they can be deployed as well. So I think that would be helpful for us, for you all to have a kind of overview of that stuff. So.
So would George be the point person?
As far as engage with he certainly is a contributor to it because of the variety of resources and funding, but a lot of George doesn't oversee the mental health sales tax.
So maybe George and Justin.
Could be a variety of both. I mean, they're the experts in the area. It's an interesting dilemma because you've got a situation where the documents that are put together say all your staff go to this new entity, and you've got George who's trying to manage all these things today, and how does he inform on recommendations that we would do? So I'd have to noodle that one a little bit. I've been thinking about it, but I wanted to see what the commissioners wanted as far as, do you want some dedicated staff to start engaging in this now? So.
I mean, I think we're gonna need to, because they're the ones that are giving the contracts out, especially the CDBG funds that came, the different dollars that we have. And know the needs of the community, where the gaps are, all of that. I mean, we've talked about that on the mental health. I think Justin really understands that as the BHASO director, how all that works, that, we're not the experts. We're taking input, and trying to make an informed decision based on the input that we're getting. Because again, we're the ones accountable to the citizens that elect us. But yeah, we've got to have a little bit more detail to know, I think, what we're currently doing, to know, again, as those sideboards, what would be handed off versus what would stay internal.
Yeah, I mean, you all have seen our early budget forecast for this year, and there aren't dollars that are available from the general fund to backfill some of these services. We're talking multi-millions of dollars that are in mental health that are being dedicated to other areas right now, as well as dollars that George's team is overseeing that have been dedicated for some period of time. So it's a tangled web.
Well, and we can't just wave a magic wand and say it's all gonna be January 1st, it's gonna be this, especially when we don't know truly what this is. I guess in my mind, I don't, because again, the ILA is what was put together, Jim, you weren't putting it together based on a member of the Board of County, thinking on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners, you were just
Exactly
putting
right.
it together as a good legal mind who understands.
Taking what was given to me and putting it in a format that would legally work, but not being that concerned with some of the terms that you've been addressing.
So
That
I
were
guess,
given to me.
yeah, so I guess I don't want people to think that you were
No,
putting it together on behalf of us.
no, oh gosh, no.
So I
In
think
fact, Chris
I
and
wanna make sure
I
the public
sent
understands that.
emails to Teresa and to Gavin and to Rick on several occasions saying, you understand that we're not acting on behalf of Spokane County. We're just taking the documents, just as you alluded to, Commissioner CUNY, and put them in a format that we can discuss and move forward.
okay, so what's our next step then?
I could make a suggested next step.
Yes.
So next week, we do have the strategic planning meeting. This one was on the second Monday because we didn't have last Monday, the commissioner meeting. So our third Monday of the month would be scheduled for next week. Randy has some budget workshop stuff that he wants to do. It's probably about an hour's worth of work. And then we could come back and review all the entitlement dollars that George is overseeing. We could review the mental health uses and commitments that have been made, so we can start to dive down to those funding sources. That would be helpful.
I'm just wondering, when you do that breakdown of what the revenue sources are, it'd be helpful from my standpoint to include how we're spending them now. And so that, if we're going to shift something, then what do we have to backfill or what are we giving up?
Well, I think that's, again, they put this in here, I think I'm clearly hearing us say, we're not shifting all dollars.
Nope.
I think it was kind of all the intent that it was gonna be the dollars that are being currently used for that, we would shift over. So this all isn't realistic.
I still think personally it'd be helpful to see all of that broken out because it's been put on the table, right? That these are the possible monies. Let's understand what that means. And I think from there, we could potentially narrow the scope.
Yeah, well, and Justin and I Johnson had a conversation, on the 1/10 money, mental health, you can't have all of it go because that's saying that every homeless person has mental health issues, which is not a valid use.
Or there's nobody with mental health that isn't homeless.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's some of those that, that's where, and I think it's talking about the uses, what potential uses are and not, but we have most of it programmed out already. And this wasn't supposed to be putting a strain on the general fund for any entity because we're all seeing, talking to a couple of mayors that I saw this weekend, everybody's facing budget issues. Coming out of COVID, we had these extra dollars, from CARES and ARP, and those are now gone, and everyone's budgets are starting to get back to strained where we were back in 2019. We were strained on our budget then. So.
Well, with regard to the mental health tax, we've had years where we didn't have enough revenue to cover all of the ones were bigger than what we had in terms of revenue and stuff. And I don't know that we really have a lot of surplus in there. We do have monies that are dedicated to mental health that we can certainly shift over, but a lot of that also goes to the court system and some other.
Yeah, which are
Yeah.
directly affecting and helping,
Yeah, but
this.
don't think the courts are gonna be real happy to know that now they gotta respond to this other non-elected entity that's gonna tell them how to spend their money. I don't wanna be in that room when that discussion happens.
I'm not advocating anything specific with respect to the mental health sales tax. I just wanted to say that I do understand why that was put on the table. I think one of the concepts that I kept hearing during the 90 days was housing and help, right? I think that there seems to be a pretty good understanding that part of responding to this situation is not only putting people in housing, but having some kind of wraparound services to help them transition out and be successful. So I think that was part of the idea, is let's find resources that could support that help part in addition to the housing. But again, it's gonna come down to what's the reality, what are the funding sources, and what can and can't be provided.
Yeah, and I guess, one of my questions, because we've all been talking a lot to people on homelessness and wraparound services and all of that, it comes back to, at TRAC, we provided all of that there. We're just gonna get the pilot program up and going, with somebody in VOA. Again, what is helping make a difference or not, and versus what have we been doing? And is it obviously hasn't making a difference because our numbers keep going up. But again, we haven't come back to, like Josh's point though, what's causing our numbers to go up? Because we're putting more money into prevention. We're really, from what I see, but maybe I'm wrong, because we know it's cheaper to keep people in housing than to have homeless. So, so those are some of the questions that, we're gonna continue to have as commissioners, even if we have this other entity, which is part of why, it's important for us to still be the ones responsible for determining the money is going there, because, one commissioner doesn't get to speak on behalf of all five of us, and so if you've got one commissioner on the board, we're still responsible for all those dollars. That's what I just, on the governance side, I'm struggling with a little bit. How do we do that? Which is why with SHREC, we did have, again, some people think we said we're just giving them all the money, but they are supposed to come to us and present a budget, and not just be, here's what we think the sales tax revenue is going to be for the year, go spend it. It's supposed to be more purposeful. I know that was my intent as we formed SHREC, because potentially there are other uses for those dollars, and determining what that is, but it still lies with the county commissioners on choosing to send all those dollars over or not, because again, we don't have electeds on the board, and so that's kind of that sideboard that we had to ensure that we're accountable to the public.
To your point that you just said about how it's cheaper to keep someone from becoming homeless than what's there, and it's how much money went through this community for rental assistance over the last 3 years to keep people in their house, and the number still went up on the number. So like you said, why?
I think another question the commissioners are gonna be wrestling with is, on the housing side, we know that we have a housing issue today. We don't have enough units, we don't have enough affordable units, everything. So by putting these dollars into another entity, how are they going to do things differently from what's been done to date? How will they be more successful? And how will the ability to site locations when you have 16 different jurisdictions with different land use policies, being able to navigate all that sort of stuff too. I believe, if I've heard correctly, what they're wanting to do, this organization, is use some of those 1590 and other dollars to bond against, to get big capital on the front end to bond against for a long period of time. again, how are they going to be able to navigate the land use policies of all the jurisdictions, which are not the same? To suggest a third party is gonna be able to do it better, maybe they can, I just don't know what that looks like.
Well, and to get back to something that Josh, and I think you said it too, Mary, is, what are the drivers that are making our numbers disproportionately higher than like-sized communities? And I'm wondering, Jeff, is it possible, and maybe this ask is too great, but is it possible to take, really the driver for a lot of policy that happens here is through the city of Spokane, to compare the policy language for the city of Spokane and Tacoma, and since their numbers are considerably lower than ours, what are they doing differently than we are that is driving their numbers down? Is there a policy decision that they've made, or is there a policy decision that we made that is attracting more, or are they just shifting more of their homeless into Seattle and King County? And if that's the solution, then maybe we need to start getting a bus to Kootenai County. I don't know. That was a joke, and that's not serious, but the issue is there's something that we're doing differently than Tacoma is for those kind of numbers, because population-wise, we're pretty close to the same. So what is it that we're doing policy-wise that's not contributing, or that's contributing to the increase in our numbers?
Geography is a big part of that. And we said it jokingly, but it's actually, in my mind, it's true. A lot of people in homelessness gravitate to where the services are.
Yeah.
Seattle is the hub of services on the
are
I-5
here.
corridor. So if you are in Tacoma, it would make sense to go up to Seattle, where we're on the receiving end here.
Yeah.
Idaho doesn't offer anywhere near the services that Washington State does, and the city of Spokane in particular. So we're a receiving entity of our geographical region, where Tacoma is more of a sending entity to Seattle, which is the receiving entity. So that's just based on my 3.5 years at HUD. I don't have the specific details in front of you, but
Well,
to
and
me,
our
geography is a big
geographic
part.
region is not just Spokane County, it's the 9 counties that surround us. Stevens to Whitman.
Canada to Oregon,
Canada to
and
Oregon.
Moses Lake to Idaho.
Yeah. My question to Jeff was, to get to your thing about policy, what is it that Tacoma's doing that leads to a lower number than what we have?
Yeah.
And he said the center of services is King County, where the center of services for us is Spokane County.
So, and I do know that Pierce County is also looking at contemplating a homeless authority.
Right.
They've been, doing this for a while and having these discussions, so I mean.
Yeah.
They're looking at it as well.
Pierce County is also very unincorporated. They have not encouraged the suburbs to go into jurisdictions. So they're a very different county where a huge part of their population is suburbia. That's unincorporated versus us, it is more rural with spots of suburbia.
So, and I think as you look at the funding, George, if that's gonna be you and Justin, kind of seeing what those fundings are. It may be looking at what they talk about as the funding sources here to make sure that we all know what these specific funding sources are for us too.
Yeah, because I think that when I look at the total stack of funding that comes through the Housing and Community Development Department, there's certainly specific dollars that are flagged exclusively for homelessness, and then others that can be used for homelessness. So I can go through and just kind of put together something for you all that shows what's. I don't think anything that's coming through our department would be 100% excluding homelessness, but we'll have those items that are homeless only for uses. And then some of that sales and use tax money that does have a caveat in there for behavioral health as well.
There was a slide, I'm not seeing it, but I thought kind of identified things as well as what's in the ILA, but you know. There's a lot of slides.
Was it the bubble diagram that showed like the RFPs?
Yes, the funding and like it didn't really, it just had county, but didn't say much about county.
A lot of their diagram actually had one-time dollars, which didn't make sense to me. They were doing the ARP home and some other.
Yes.
Yeah, that one, the county funds were one-time, not ongoing, a good portion of them.
Yeah, under HUD, they have CDBG, home, ESG, and home ARP that they do list as one time.
Well, the home ARP was
then-
also the wrong dollar amount and, yeah,
That was
the dollar
under
amount's 3,005,000.
yeah, HUD entitlement funds and then HUD continuum of care funds.
Remember, these were volunteers.
Yeah. No, so I think it's, you know, it's kind of breaking this down for us as well as that first and second section 5.
Pick a section 5 and go.
Yeah, because I mean, I think we need to understand, you know, if they're putting RCW references, what those RCW's references really mean. So.
I think one other thing that I'll add, Commissioner French, kind of to your point earlier, we're not gonna, as a community, end homelessness on dollars. It's gonna be through interventions, and those different policy decisions that we make. We've made as a collective community some really good policy decisions, and we've made some policy decisions that certainly have opportunity for improvement. And so I think that if anything, having some entity that's able to help provide, similar to what the Housing and Community Development Advisory Committee provides to you all, with some prioritization, some recommendations on how to allocate resources that align more consistently with kind of those policy decisions. I think there's a great opportunity there where I feel like the work that that Rick, Gavin, and Teresa have done, which commendable as volunteers. But I think that it's so centralized, or at least it's being talked about so centrally around dollars and cents versus those policies and those prioritizations that we're trying to make. Because reducing homelessness by 40% in 2 years, that's something that can be done, but it can't be done with just dollars. It has to be driven by interventions, policies that are supporting those interventions. And I think that's, if we're gonna really make a dent in the issues that we've been seeing over the last several years, I think it's gonna have to come through that more regional approach to this. And I mean, I won't speak for the city of the Valley, but some of the conversations that we've had with them and some of the concerns I'm sure you all as commissioners have heard as well is a differing in policies, and whether that's real or not. It's just causing some tension within the system, the overall system, that I think if we can find a way to get through that, then we might be able to really start making some progress.
That's the other part of this, and I appreciate, Chris, reminding us that what they've done to this date is volunteer work. But as I heard in the presentation and subsequent conversation, the expectation is that the three of them are now going to be consultants to the city of Spokane and be paid for their work as they organize and finish taking this the next step of the evolution. And so that then creates a different relationship, but maybe a different opportunity. If they are going to be paid consultants by the city, then who's going to manage that? Are they going to be a self-managing entity? Are they going to be managed by the city? Are they going to be managed by the county? coordination, I mean, I don't know. But that was something that I took away from the presentation too, is that, okay, given here, if you want us to continue, we're gonna get paid for it.
I missed that.
Yeah. I think a lot of folks did.
But either way, I think the county, we have smart people here. Driving it a bit more, I think would be helpful going forward, because it's ultimately gonna be on us to decide.
And whether the paid or not, it is not I can appreciate the fact that for the work that they're doing, they probably should be paid. I don't have any issue with that. My issue is who's going to be directed? You know, is it gonna be them self-directing? Is it gonna be us? Is it gonna be the city? Who? And I don't know.
That's the first I'm hearing, so I don't know. I mean,
In our work groups, they kept joking, saying, as soon as this 90 days is up, we're walking away. We're finished. We're back to being retired. So I didn't know they were staying on beyond that. So.
And so again, you know, I appreciate all the work and effort that they put into this, because I know, you know, Gavin really put himself into the homeless area and all of that. You know, but it's like there's people that have been doing this work for a long time that have different knowledge and experience. The three of them are not elected, so they don't understand as much what it means to be, you know, accountable to our constituents. They worked for the mayor, I mean, so they certainly understand it, but it's just different when you live it versus not. And I think they all three worked for a mayor. You know, and it's easier to make things happen and accomplish when you're working for one elected versus how many electeds collectively are we all gonna be that would be signing off on this agreement? So I mean, so I think that's the nuance that we all, you know, that to get everybody to come together on this, it's gonna take time. It's not gonna happen overnight. And I think we all agree that we don't want to be doing things the same way that we've been doing it. I mean, I think the Valley, I mean, they put a lot of time and effort into, the city of Spokane Valley put a lot of time and effort into really analyzing homelessness in their city and what they could do or not do, you know, to help guide that. I mean, I was out there one time, this whole flow chart on the whiteboard. You know, so they've been really diving into it. I mean, so I think, you know, at this point, the electeds have not really been part of those inner discussions. I mean, you were part of some discussions, but not really all this inner discussion. And so now it's just we're getting into that piece, so we can make an informed decision. So I don't think any of us are saying it's a no-go. I would say the way it's written today is not where we're going to be at in the future, but I think we all still want to try to strive to do better. So
I think we all want to make it work. We just don't know how.
And this provides a, you know,
Starting point.
A starting point, yeah. So all our, you know, I don't want people to think their work was in vain, because it's certainly not. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff here, but there's a lot of, you know, contemplation that we need to do, you know, on it. Okay. So I mean, you may need time. I mean, I don't know how much time you need to kind of get the numbers together, the funding. I don't want to.
Oh, I can be back here next Monday.
Okay. Well, then let's just bring it back up next Monday.
Yeah, and Randy had shared a overview of the last couple of years of mental health sales tax uses. I want Justin to be available for that as well, just because he talks in more specificity on some of those uses and how it's being provided in the community today.
Okay, so that'll be our next Monday's work session. Very good.
And so next Tuesday is the launch on the city line, and I'll be dedicated to that ceremony from 8 o'clock until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I only raise it that if we were going to do strategic planning or briefing, it's gonna be Tuesday morning, then I won't be here. Josh, I think you're gonna be expected to be there too.
No, and I know they invited all of the
Yeah,
commissioners, so I think, probably we're gonna need to move Tuesday morning to Monday afternoon.
yeah, that's where I was going, is just to make sure we get everything covered.
Thanks for bringing that up. I think we had planned on doing that because all the commissioners had gotten invites to the Central City Line. So
Yeah.
we had anticipated that. So for next week, Monday morning, strategic planning meeting, Monday afternoon, BOCC briefing.
Okay.
Nothing Tuesday morning.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
So it's just helpful if we know who's gonna be here and who's not for issues. So yes, because that's where we gotta just try to figure out how to make it all work. So, okay, I have a miscellaneous, I don't know, Scott, if you have any miscellaneous.
I've got a couple too.
So my miscellaneous, when Jane Wall from the Craft Board was in town, I met with her, and they're coming over in October.
Right.
For your board meeting.
Yep.
And she talked about with having 2 new commissioners, and I've actually never been through it, that they can do a training just to kind of talk about what CRAB is, informational, kind of like what we're doing with courthouse visits with WASAC. Informational to talk about what CRAB does, how it interacts with the county road engineer, and kind of what the role of the county road engineer is. And so that would be a special meeting that we would need to do, which would be Wednesday, the 25th of October, because your meeting is on the 26th.
Yeah, we meet typically.
Thursday, Friday?
We meet Thursday, Friday,
So,
and then we do local Thursday morning or Wednesday, but in this case, yeah, so I had dinner with Jane when we were here, we talked through some of this stuff. But yeah, no, that'd be great, I mean, and it can be technically, it can be for the whole board if you want.
right.
Yeah.
No, so we would do a special meeting,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
our entire board would
Yeah.
kind of hear
That'd be
the
great.
purpose of CRAB and,
What was the date again?
it's October
25th,
25th,
yeah.
so, okay.
Well, CRAB is the most intriguing acronym I've heard since I've been here, so I'm excited to learn more.
It'll crawl up on you. Yeah.
So, anyway, so we'll plan for a special meeting, we'll have kind of all the assistants work through that. I'll have Brendan check back with Jason request.
Yeah, Jason.
Okay, he was the one that, because we just wanna do it since they're in town, we don't wanna have them come over for a special.
And Victoria interacts with Jason constantly and stuff, because we
Okay.
gotta coordinate my schedule and then meetings and everything else, so she can also be a great resource.
So we will put you and Brenda on figuring out a special meeting time by looking at everyone's calendars for that, and anyone else in the county is welcome to attend. Anyone?
Yeah, I know that Matt meets with Jane and then Drew and some of the other staff over the CRAB fairly frequently, because we do a lot of training, or a lot of our staff have actually gone through CRAB training for CAD programs and other things, so, yeah, they do a great job.
No, it sounds like it, so I'm excited, I think it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to hear, and I think it talks about the importance of county roads, as commissioners, why it's an important piece of what we do, from what she was saying, so, yeah, so, okay, so we will put that out there.
For where the acronym comes from is county commissioners actually were county road administrators before they ever created the designation of county commissioners, and it's because our only job used to be keeping control of the roads. So, but we've evolved.
So, that was my miscellaneous.
So I have a couple. One, I've had 3 city council members for the city of Spokane Valley, including the mayor, come to me and say, when can we get access to our CDBG funds? Because we've got to make commitments, we've got contracts, we've got bids, yada, 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 and I don't know. So today's meeting was timely, if we could find out where we're at. And all three of them are under the impression that we are holding up the release of the funds. And I'm kind of going, well, I'm pretty sure it's not the board, because I was not aware, and I don't think any of the rest of us were aware of it. So somewhere, somebody has made a decision that they're not releasing those funds to the valley until something happens, and I don't know what it is that needs to happen, and I know who needs to make it happen. That was your problem.
How it was relayed to me was there were certain staff of the county that they had reached out to have a discussion about CDBG, and they were told, we can't talk to you about any until we know on the regional homelessness and if CDBG money is going to that. And so they were worried that, oh no, we just voted to stick with you guys and now all our money can be swept to this homeless effort.
Yeah, that was one of the conversations I had with one of them.
So
Yeah.
The only thing I can even attach that to is the three-year consortium that we just talked about. I'm not aware of anything, and both George and I wish he would have held on here. George and I have been in meetings with Eric Lamb, with John Holman, with Gloria, I can't remember Gloria's last name there, multiple times, just talking about, are they gonna be part of the consortium or not? I don't know, I'll ask George, but I'm not aware of anything that's holding up CDBG,
Okay.
so I suspect
Okay.
they may be confusing the issues, but.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's the case.
There's nothing that we would have done, the normal annual allotment of the dollars, I believe it's on a biannual or a July to June cycle.
Right.
I believe we get our dollars somewhere in the October timeframe, so they start doing RFPs in these coming months now. So all that should be, I've heard nothing that would be different for a
My
procedure.
understanding is that in anticipation of the funds, they've gone ahead and put out the bid or have got contracts ready to go. If they know the funds are gonna be there in October, they can save a construction cycle. And that's what they're trying to do, is save a construction cycle. So you might wanna circle back with John Holman, Herman, and maybe get the true story on what's going on
Because
there.
all those would have come through the HDCDA board
Okay.
for their recommendations. And so if that hasn't happened yet, there's nothing, the city of the valley doesn't themselves, from what I understand,
They don't
do any
sell.
RFPs for the CDBG.
That has already happened, is how it was relayed to me.
Okay.
So they're ready to go. In fact, two of them hit both Josh and I up when they were doing the presentation on the homelessness thing about, you guys have got, and stuff. So anyway, so now it's in your court. Tag. The other thing is, I found out yesterday that the city of Spokane is going to be putting in channelization on Hatch Road, down by Highland
Park.
Highland Park,
Yes, because I'm
and
getting the same calls
and-
because I've got county residents on the other side of my district that
Yeah.
are not happy.
yeah, so it's in her district, because Hatch Road is the dividing line. But I know folks on both sides, folks on both sides, and they're screaming that particularly for Pine Court, they can't get emergency vehicles in because the channelization cuts off access into, wait for it, I can tell you the name of the road because there's no way I'm gonna remember it. Tomahawk or Tamarack. Tomaker Lane, yes, thank you, and stuff, so,
I can tell you all that.
yeah, so I got a bunch of emails and text messages and everything. So, yeah, so if you, and I can show you pictures of it, I'm sure Mary can show you pictures of it. What the city is doing is they're basically just cutting off access to a county neighborhood. And they're concerned because it also cuts off access for emergency vehicles. And so, if a fire truck or an ambulance has to go, they gotta circle all the way down and then all the way back, and it just takes some time.
They're cutting off access to both connection points with.
No, it's
Tom
providing
Ridley.
great access to the city side of the Hatch Road. It's cutting off access to the county side of Hatch Road.
So channelization, there've been like hardened medians or something
Yep.
in there?
Yep,
Yes.
Up and down the whole thing?
just right in front of Highland Park. And like I said, it provides great access into Highland Park. It cuts off access to, I think it's called Pine Development or Pine, anyway, it's the southeast side of Hatch Road. It loses all their access.
And Stephen Pohl, who's the chair of art planning.
Yeah, is one of those
commission, is
impacted.
one of those impacted.
I can show you the picture of what they're talking about. They forwarded to me the photographs of it, aerial photographs of it. And it clearly sucks for those residents, but here's the picture of it. I mean, it is a hard island in front.
Right turn only.
Right turn only, but look, for Tomac, you can't get access to it.
So, I guess my
Tomahawker's a
question,
loop.
yeah, my question is, if
are they
they have
blocking
access to both?
Huh?
Are they putting that in on both sections where Tomahawker connects to Hatch? Because Tomahawker loops around and connects to Hatch in two different points.
They're putting it on this side of it, and you can see the picture of it. They're not doing it to both of them, they're just doing it to the one. Yeah, right,
So they're putting it here.
yeah, they're putting it there at Westchester
Just at
and
this-
Highland Park Drive. It's both of these, so it cuts off both of these. And now to get left turn, these folks have got to go around
That's what
here
that's
to
what I'm
go.
trying to figure out.
Because you can't turn left on Highland Park Drive.
Oh.
Because it's got an island there, and you can't get onto Tomacker from Hatch unless you get up above. So all these people have got to come through the neighborhood to get access.
And I think that upper point on Tomacker is kind of almost a blind corner.
A blind corner,
If you're
yeah.
trying to get out, because you've got the people that are just coming down Hatch that are going fast.
So I don't know whether the city coordinated with the county or not. I can't imagine that our county engineers wouldn't see that as a problem,
Right,
but
and that probably didn't know to go and testify, because even, I think Stephen was saying he wasn't really notified.
yeah,
It was just the
Yeah.
posting, he didn't get, a
Kind of
letter or
notice or
anything because it was
anything.
the city
yeah.
doing it, not the county. So we'd like to try to have discussions on that.
Yeah, we want to influence the outcome.
I'll see if our public works team has had any awareness of it.
Okay,
Yes, thank you for bringing that up,
Yeah.
because I had gotten the same stuff and I was gonna talk to Matt. I tried to call him last week, but he was out.
I got hit by both Brad Stark and Stephen Pohl over the week, yesterday. You gotta stop this.
What's wrong with the painted turn lanes that are there already?
People drive over them.
Yeah.
I just, well, and with all the funding that needs to happen in Latah Valley, why they're focusing funding here instead of on Latah Valley where they really need infrastructure is amazing, but maybe that's why we got the problem we do. So somebody knows somebody because they're getting nice islands. Just saying. Anyway,
And did you have something else? That was
no,
one.
those are my two items.
What was your second one? Oh, the CDBG and the
CDBG funds were the first one and
Hatch.
Hatch.
I have one, so each year we usually buy a table for the state of the city of the valley. It falls on July 26th, which is a date that we're out that week, but just wasn't sure. Would there be enough people around where we'd wanna buy a table, or, I don't know.
I'm going, but I'm sitting Max he bought a table.
Okay.
So I'm sitting at his table, so I'm
Okay.
going. So I don't know if we just wanna,
Yeah, I don't know if we have enough people to fill the whole table since we're out that week. I don't know if people are traveling or people, so I don't know. So I just thought I'd bring it to the agenda. I got the email last week about it, so.
I think it'd be good to buy a table and show our support for it.
So
I'm sure we can fill it.
I'll sit at one of the seats, so, but I don't know if there's anybody else that'll sit with me.
I've talked to a
Is
couple
it-
of people already to sit at my table, so.
Okay.
Is it a lunch or is it?
Yeah.
It's a
It's a
lunch.
lunch?
11:30 to 1, Wednesday, July 26th
Well,
at
you
Center
know,
Place.
Lord knows you don't wanna pass up a free meal. That was a joke. It's a joke.
7:26, right?
I'll join you if you want.
I'll need to see if I'm
Yeah, I'll
invited,
join you.
but I will happily come if I'm invited.
Oh, no, you're invited. I mean, it's, if the
It's
county,
ticket, you buy a ticket, you're
It's a
invited.
come one, come all.
so if the county's gonna buy a table, I mean, the commissioners have the first seats at any table we purchase, so.
Yeah, I'd be happy to come.
Okay.
So why don't you, since you're the Valley Chamber person, make sure we do that. And then,
We got one ordered, and then
yeah,
send out an email and see who wants to go.
Yeah.
So. All right.
so I think I've got Brenda and
Is it
Jeff
gonna
are
be
sitting
a-
at my.
Mary-
Come on.
Mary
Yeah.
Well, Victoria will wanna go then,
Yeah.
because I can't be out on my own.
We'll
It's
see
at-
how
it's
many
at Center
seats there,
Place.
see
Center
how many
Place.
seats there are first, and then, like I said, commissioners have the first right.
And then we may have to steal Brenda and Jeff from you to fill ours, so.
I think it sounds like you'll have plenty of opportunity to fill it. I mean, Scott would probably, should go,
I've usually went to those with Ralph.
so.
We'll show off our legal muscle, we'll bring Chris, so. We're good? Sure. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So is it-
I need 2 tables at this
Is
point.
it 11:30? 11:30 to 1?
Usually.
Yeah, 11:30. Oh, and I just got an email from Ashley. Thanks, Ashley. She says, if you need to fill a spot at the table,
There you go.
she'll go too.
So now a hot ticket.
I assume you're in, Victoria?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So you got 2 out of me.
All right, we're good. We're gonna fill the table.
We're gonna
Yes.
fill the
We're gonna
table.
do it.
All right.
There you go.
All right.
Just heard from Heather, who's been listening on, Heather Arnold, saying that what's holding up the new CDB contracts is that we have not received from HUD their contracts, their CDBG home contracts.
Oh,
We're
okay.
waiting for the feds
Oh, okay.
on that. Good.
The Region 10 director passed away 2 weeks ago. So there's probably a little bit of, I'm sure they're getting to go up and going quickly. 52-year employee, cancer. A sad loss for everyone involved, but that might be causing a touch of delay.
Chris, anything?
Happy All-Star Week.
Yes.
Mariners went 7-2 going into the All-Star break, beating all the best teams in baseball, so things looking up. That's my update.
Which is awesome.
team.
It's how you finish.
That's right. Should be a fun home run derby tonight and the
That's
All-Star
right.
game tomorrow.
Yep.
So, yeah. Very good. I should know you'll give us the baseball update. That's always
This is
good.
the first thing that came to mind.
Okay, well, thank you all very much. It's 11:24. We have no other business coming.
I think
Chris Anderson?
with Amber, with Commissioner Waldorf out this morning, I have an exec session, but it can wait till tomorrow.
So we'll
For this
anticipate
morning.
that either after the morning session or if we don't have time, then after the afternoon.
Either would be fine.
Great. Then, since there's no other business to come before us, we will